Okay, I pushed the button. Okay. This is fine and visible, right? This works? Yeah, sure, good. Hi! Hello there, my parasocial pals, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Chloe Payne, and I have no idea what I'm doing. Today, we're dealing with allergies! But it is the only time that I have to try to sit and do the book-related reflection that I want to get done here before my next couple weekends are going to be busy with some good but time-consuming travel things that I'm very excited about, but I'm trying to just catch up on some YouTube goodness before that. So I apologize in advance for the sniffly thing that is my voice right now, and the box of Kleenex that I may end up resorting to at various moments. There are at least a couple things that we've done here for the setup of the video to try to pump ourselves up, find that energy, even though all we want to do is take a steamy bath and try to clear out our sinuses and chug a bunch of Claritin and go to bed. The couple things that we've done to try to motivate are, first of all, hi, look, it's a Christmas tree. We were getting ready to take down the Christmas tree, and we did put away the rest of the Christmas stuff. And we had considered leaving the tree up, because it's just a little tiny miniature tree. It's a little like 3-footer. And we had considered leaving it up to be just like a seasonal tree. Like we can cover it in Valentine's silly tchotchkes, and then we can cover it in like St. Patrick's silly tchotchkes, like, you know, the seasonal, like that silly idea of like a wreath or a porch goose or whatever else you put like seasonal stuff up on, right? And so when we were considering taking decorations off of it to try to transition it into like the next phase of its existence, we were looking at all the ornaments and realizing, well, let's just leave up like the spooky Halloween related ones and like the gay ones. And we realized very quickly as we assessed it that that summarizes what all of the decorations are. It's just a spooky gay tree. So the tree for now is for the long term, and when I was trying to, you know, psych myself up to sit and record a little video and think about booktube related things, the idea of sitting and having a little tree in the background just was one way to motivate myself. And the other thing, I'm about to put on my glasses that make it easier for me to see the things on the laptop, but in the meantime, before I put the glasses on, I invite you to just take a moment to appreciate be quiet with your bright lights, computer. Take a moment to just appreciate the fact that I tried to get slightly spruced up and motivate myself to be cute on camera, even though I fear that I'm about to sneeze all of this off at any given moment.
Look, I have a little bit of glittery blue highlighter action going on. Look, I have a little bit of pale blue for the upper part of the eye.
Look, effort. Look, trying to get ourselves hype for cuteness.
Please clap.
Okay, we're off to a great start. My body is a cage. Okay, so now that we are sufficiently hype and motivated and feeling cute and definitely ain't nothing gonna bring us down, what are we doing for today's video, you may ask? Well, I have recently been getting more into booktube related stuff. I have a couple other topics that I want to tackle first, but I think that the next time that I make a video about book topics, I might just do like the booktuber newbie tag and like more fully introduce myself as a person who is like ready to start just trying to like make more videos around this area of interest. In the meantime, I thought that I would just start by trying to review for myself how many books I read in 2022, what types of books I read. I've never done anything like Goodreads or Storygraph, partially just because the decision fatigue is too much for me at any given time. Like I've a couple times gotten into the wormhole of the pros and cons of each. If you have any opinion on whether Goodreads or Storygraph or maybe an entirely different app is a fun way to mainly just like have a record of your reading history is what I'm most interested in. I don't do a lot of reviewing or rating books. I don't find that to be helpful for myself or when I'm talking to other people about books. I don't like to do a ton of like comparing my reading habits to either anyone else or like past versions of myself. The only reason that I'm starting now to think about maybe this year being a good time to start with this thing that I've never done before of just like keeping track of my own reading habits habits, getting inspiration for making booktube type videos. I think that it would just be easier for me to think of what fun topics to discuss and make comparisons between different books that I've read if I can have an easy way to keep track for myself of what the books are that I've read. Prior to this point in my life and prior to like really starting to get more into booktube stuff, I have not ever done any tracking of my reading habits or the books that I've read, partially because like I've definitely always had the idea that at one point in my future there will be the goal of setting up like a forever home, and that forever home will involve the accruing of physical books and a collection and the cultivation of shelves that, you know, make me happy, a little reading nook, a little chair, all that good shit. In the meantime though, my whole life and certainly my whole young adult life that I've been on my own, you know, I'm one of those shitty millennials who's just been hopping from apartment to apartment my entire life and doesn't have a lot of belongings, a lot of like physical stuff that I take with me from like home to home, and certainly I've never had the space or the means to accrue physical books. My thinking then was always very ethereal, existential mode of thinking about my reading habits in terms of, yeah, I may not necessarily remember every single book that I read, but the ones that I will remember will be the ones that really stick with me, and if they are meant to still be on my mind in 10 years when I'm thinking about setting up a forever home with bookshelves and I want to like, you know, build an actual physical collection, then the things that, you know, float to the surface, the things that like make it through the rigmarole of my memory will be the things that stick with me, and the rest can just have been good experiences that I had while I was reading them, and I don't need to necessarily remember every single thing I've ever read. I don't have any regrets about that. That was a mode that kept my brain very calm and very happy and very mindful and just present in my reading habit in past years. More recently, like probably since like 2020, since I've been getting kind of more into like booktube related stuff and just observing and learning more about what other people get out of the different ways that they track their reading habits and their history. And I can feel myself now heading into that phase of my life where I am maybe going to be starting to think about what books I might actually want to physically have in my home long term. And I am getting excited thinking about that. For several years there, I was in kind of a reading slump through like my late 20s, early 30s, and it's only been since like 2020-ish that I've been sort of getting back into a joyful habit of reading, a consistent habit of reading. And it's been then in these last couple years that some books are really like making an impact on me, that I do feel that sense of I would never want to forget about that book. I would never want to leave that out when I get to the point where I am just reflecting, even if I don't end up getting the physical book, even just remembering like, you know, the impact that it had on me will feel really good. So yeah, I am going to take some time in this video today to just review for myself what books I read during 2022. I think I might also do sort of like an honorable mention for like what other books during like 2020 and 2021 really stuck with me that I would want to make sure I never forget in the future, and that have just definitely like shaped a big part of like what my reading habit is currently and where I think it's going. I think that this will be a fun little like time capsule to be able to reflect back on in the future. I am not really concerned with numbers. I have again found it really interesting to realize as I watch more booktube content that there are other people who have numbers that they keep track of, numbers that they set specific goals of in terms of like, I want to read more books than I did this upcoming year. I've never been like a keep track of numbers for feeling a sense of accomplishment type of brain. That's just not what feels like accomplishment for me. I appreciate the ebbs and tides and like, you know, practical day-to-day concerns of life, of the world, that might sometimes mean that you read fewer books, or, you know, maybe there's a period of time where you're reading really long, thick, chunky novels that impact how many books you can read because it's a bigger page count, but it's, you know, just as fulfilling as the periods of time that you go through where maybe you're reading a bunch of thinner, like graphic novels, and technically that's a higher number of books. But, you know, it's all kind of arbitrary to me to think about the number. So I'm not overly concerned with whatever the number might be that we learn once we compile it here after our review. I don't expect it to be a very high number. I think I probably only read like 15-ish books this past year, maybe into the 20s. I would be surprised if it gets into the 20s. And I expect that that number might be higher this upcoming year, just because now this year I'm in like more book clubs with coworkers and like having more fun with like readathon things that I've always wanted to get into. I'm getting into this year. But again, I'm not like doing this in order to have a strict goal to set for myself for the future. I'm primarily just interested in having this review be about not forgetting what books I read this year and what books have really been hitting me in these couple of years that I've been really getting back into reading. I frankly don't read like physical books very often, simply because, again, I don't have the space to be accumulating a bunch of books, so I very rarely purchase physical books. When I read physical copies of a book, it's usually things from the library. Most often my reading habits are digital. A lot of the books that I read are sapphic, queer, contemporary, like rom-com type books, and a lot of my favorite authors of that genre are just like people who do indie publishing and publish direct to like Kindle or Amazon, or you know, the online methods of like self-publishing is really fun for me. I like those authors, and so a lot of the things that I read are like, you know, cheap purchases that I make to support people who are just doing self-publishing endeavors online. So one of the main ways that we're going to be figuring out what we read this year are reviewing like the Kindle app purchases, reviewing Google Books, Google Reads, whatever the fuck the name of that app is. Itchy nose, itchy nose. Playbooks is the name of the app. So yeah, we'll be going through the Kindle app history, we'll be going through the Playbooks app history, and then for my library history, I don't know if I go through like my Libby history or if I go through like my history for the online section of my like local library checkout history. I don't know if that's a way to keep track of what I've read from the library recently, but I will see if that is a thing. Spoiler alert, I ended up realizing that it is not a thing, or at least I could not find how to make that option work. If you are better at using your local library than I might be at using my local library, having just moved to a new town over the summer, please feel welcome to leave any recommendations below in the comments. If you have tips or tricks for using, you know, maybe your digital online record library card magic to be able to like keep track of what your past checkouts are. I wasn't smart enough to find that in the course of this video, so when we get to the point later where I'm actually recounting, here are the books that I read via each of these sources that I use, the couple of library books that I end up mentioning are just based on my squeaky little brain and what it remembered. So hopefully I didn't leave any out. It's not the end of the world, obviously, if I did. Woo! I think that's it. I'll be going through the Kindle, I'll be going through the playbooks, I'll be going through the library, and we're just gonna be making a little list on ye olde Chromebook for future reference. Oh, and as I look over my notes here on the computer, fanfiction, like I won't include, I guess, anything in my numbers or the reviewing the things that I read that are like, you know, having anything to do with going through my AO3 history. That's a personal place. But yeah, fanfiction is always, of course, a wonderful way to keep one's love of reading alive as well. I do think one thing that I might do at some point in the future will be not an entire like AO3 deep dive history, but specifically Schitt's Creek fandom. The fictionalized love story of David and Patrick, as, you know, documented by some very talented, awesome writers on AO3. And I totally think that at some point I might just do like
my top 5 David and Patrick fanfics.
If I saw somebody make that video on youtube.com, I would click that watch button so hard you wouldn't be able to stop me. But for the purposes of today's video, I won't bog anyone down with any of the details from Archive of Our Own, or Tumblr, or, you know. Okay, all right, let's jump on in. My brain hurts, it's itchy in my brain. I've contabulated, I've calculated, I have numericized The numbers are in. Apparently I read 20 books. I think that I actually laid this out in such a way that I can basically go in like chronological order from like where I started at the beginning of... Yeah! Here is a pretty much chronological list of all the books that I read this past year, beginning with January of 2022. And I'm not gonna say much in terms of like mini reviews of these books. I'm kind of just making a little record for my future self of what the books were that I read. In January 2022, I was still feeling in a Christmassy mood, so first up we have a sapphic Christmas rom-com kind of read called Under the Mistletoe by Everly James. And then we read Meet Cute Club by Jack Harbin, It Started With a Kiss by Claire Lydon, The Glow Up by Cara Malone, The Devil Wears Tartan by Katya Rose, and then Catch and Cradle by Katya Rose. I'm not including it in my tally of the books that I read, but one of the only things that I DNF'd, Those Who Wait by Haley Cass, and I just am stating that here because I rarely DNF things, and I really tried to give that book a shot. I think the percentage indication on the Kindle app said that I made it like 40% of the way through or something like that. I really tried with that book, but it was not for me. Next up of the things that I read, again, a couple streaks by authors that I liked. No Rings Attached by Rachel Lacey, and Read Between the Lines by Rachel Lacey. Guava Flavored Lies by J.J. Arias, Girlfriend Material by Katya Rose, and then I don't think I quite did this chronologically, but several more in a series by Rachel Lacey. Don't Cry for Me, It's in Her Kiss, and Come Away With Me. And actually right now I am in the midst of reading the newest from Rachel Lacey. I think it's called She'll Steal Your Heart or Steal Your Heart or something like that. Rachel Lacey is an author that I enjoy a great deal. I reread a favorite from my childhood called The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle by Avi. Another Katya Rose like little novella called Stop and Stare. Oh, and then this was the year, that I read books 2 and 3 from Alexandria Bellafleur's trilogy called Hang the Moon and Count Your Lucky Stars. Reread The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, a graphic novel adaptation of The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. The adaptation was done by Peter Kluper? I don't know why I always feel like I'm writing it down incorrectly. And Stone Fruit by Lee Lai. I think that those are all the books, yes, that I actually read. Some honorable mentions that I'm including here. Again, not including in like my tally, but more so just giving myself also the quick review in my brain of what were some of the big things that really impacted me from 2021 and 2020, because this is the first time that I've ever really sat and started to like make a record for myself of my reading habits, my reading history. Alexandria Bellafleur is an author who made a big impact on me. In 2020, it was 2021 because the day that I got my first vaccine shot, I went to a Barnes & Noble for the first time since lockdown had started. I had been all through pandemic just doing a ton of fan fiction on AO3. The Barnes & Noble, the day that I got my first shot was the first moment that I gave myself the opportunity to really think about, oh my gosh, I think I might be able to find more sapphic reading in traditionally published formats. Although I am not here for the quality comparison bullshit debate. Fanfiction is perfectly valid as like a form of writing and a form of reading. But I was just curious, you know, could I translate some of the passion that I had found in the fanfic world to traditionally published books? And I assume some queer people on the staff had taken the liberty, had taken it upon themselves to set up a nice gay section of the Barnes & Noble, and the cover of Written in the Stars by Alexandria Bellafleur really jumped out at me. I am from originally the Seattle area of Washington, and so the parts of the cover that had to do with the Space Needle and this sort of like astrology thing, and then you get into reading the summary and it's all about someone who like reads and writes fan fiction, and they're working on like a dating app that's called like OTP. And I'm a sucker for a fake dating AU, and that's very much the crux of like what kind of trope. That book was a big impact on me in getting me more into starting again to read published books as opposed to only fan fiction. It just made me really, really happy during a really, really hard time. So shout out to Written in the Stars. I never want to forget about that. Annie on My Mind was a book that I read earlier in the pandemic. Annie on My Mind by Nancy Garden is the author. I came out later in life. I came out in like summer and fall of 2019. A lot of the first formative experiences that I had in terms of like, you know, my queer identity identity and whatnot was like late 2019, early 2020, and then being in a fucking pandemic. So in early lockdown, I had the experience of just start wanting to reflect more and learn more about like the history of queer characters in published books. Annie on My Mind is considered by a lot of people to have been like one of the first young adult books with a lesbian relationship published in it. Like, it's the story of two teenage girls falling in love. Reading that was just really helpful for me. You know, I'm a sucker for narratives of people, discovering their queerness and, finding their coming out journey and not knowing that gay can be a thing until you find the gay within you. So that was a really interesting experience. It reads very much like a Judy Blume. Like, I think it was published in 1982 or 84, like that. It feels very much like something that was written in sort of like a little time capsule of like, it's decades ago, there are no cell phones, it's two teenage girls running around New York. If you're, the kind of person who enjoys narratives of like young people having independence in terms of like, riding the subway in New York and going to museums in Central Park. It was a really, really cool book, and it meant a lot to me at that time, especially. The Lyremouth Chronicles by Jane Fletcher. In my video about the Bloomin' Readathon, I talked a little bit about this series, how I stumbled across it. Basically, I am a Ravenclaw who is recovering from the trauma of J.K. Rowling being a TERF. So in the early days of lockdown, when I really could have used a comfort reread, like jumping back into Harry Potter for the 8th time and rereading those books, I couldn't bring myself to read those books. They mean different things to me now. And so instead, I went on Google and I did a search that was something to the effect of, what is a book series that is like Harry Potter, but with lesbians? And that is how I found out about the Lyremouth Chronicles. You can check out my Bloomin' Readathon video and jump to the timestamp about it if you want to hear more specifically about like what my experience was of reading that first book of the series. But suffice it to say, I am now on book 2 of reading the series and having a great time with it. I'm really, really glad that I jumped into it. Can you hear the dog barking outside? I hope that the doggy outside is not having a bad night. Fucking The Artist's Way. 2020 was the last time that I made an attempt to slog through The Artist's Way. Frankly, it was the kind of experience that was like a very validating thing for me of like, you know what? I don't have to keep reading people's fucking self-help bullshit to try to work on the goals that I want to work on. The Artist's Way was the first experience that I had of, you know what? Maybe the people who are out here trying to tell us that they have everything figured out and we should listen to them are goddamn hucksters who don't know what they're talking about. So that was just a good piece of like confidence building for me, that like I don't have to believe or judge myself based on the appraisal of what some author of like a narcissistic, narrow-minded, outdated idea of like how one should live one's life. I don't have to take that kind of opinion into account when like judging myself harshly. If it doesn't vibe with me, maybe that's just because it doesn't happen to vibe with me and not because my brain is wrong and the author's brain is right. So that was just helpful for like me starting to develop a spine and have my own opinions. And the Twilight books. I took a moment during the composing of this list to check in with myself about whether there were any audiobook experiences that I needed to include, because I've always had a hard time getting into audiobooks. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I have a difficult time with audiobooks, partially because a lot of what I get out of podcasts is the appreciation and enjoyment of the conversation of like, multiple people on a podcast, as opposed to then when I try to put on an audiobook, it has a hard time keeping my attention sometimes. And I'm starting to try to change that about myself. There are a couple audiobooks that I have on my TBR for this year that I'm looking forward to. But in the meantime, the only sort of audiobook experience that has ever really hit for me is technically from a podcast. The Page 7 podcast from the Last Podcast Network is a really wonderful pop culture comedy show. The hosts are just 3 very different people, and they bring a really lively and entertaining point of view to just like, gossiping about pop culture bullshit. It's a really nice turn your brain off and just laugh for 45 minutes every week kind of show. I am a member of their Patreon, and one of the perks that you get is you get to listen to one of the hosts of the podcast, Jackie Zabrowski, does sort of a book club where she just reads out loud a book that everybody votes, hey, we would like you to read this book this cycle, Jackie. It's an audiobook experience then, but it's from like a podcast creator that I really like and who fills the audiobook experience with a lot of interjection and comedy and her unique style of like sort of talking to the listener. It feels very podcasty. It doesn't feel quite as dry as some other audiobook experiences have felt for me. And at the beginning of pandemic, she had never read the Twilight books, but I think it's sort of an effort for the rest of us who voted on, oh my gosh, you should read the Twilight books on the Patreon. I think that for a lot of us, it was about like, you know, a nostalgia. It was about having a comfort reread experience and how fun it would be to have this comedy personality that we all love go through the experience of reading these books for the first time. And she had no idea what was going to happen. So, you know, getting to hear her find out what happens at this point and, oh my God, the wedding and, oh my God, Jacob, like, you know, those things were a fascinating experience. I had read the Twilight books before, and to have the experience of going along the audiobook sort of podcast style journey of rereading all of them in the weird days of pandemic. She would do one chapter every week. So I think it took like 2 years to get through all the books. And she did Midnight Sun at the end of the Twilight books as well. That might actually have been like part of what started the conversation, was the fact that Midnight Sun was going to get published. That was an experience that brought me a lot of joy. If we all can agree, as we should, that like listening to an audiobook is a valid form of reading, then it occurs to me, if I think about the books that had the biggest impact on me in like 2020 and 2021, the experience of listening to the audiobooks of Twilight on Jackie Zabrowski's Patreon had a big impact on me, for sure. Oh, fuck. Okay, well, that was the last Kleenex in the box. So I think that's our sign to wrap it up. Thank you for coming on this little journey with me. This was really, really helpful for me. And I hope it's not too foolhardy of me to imagine that a video like this could be entertaining for a viewer as well. I really like to watch this type of content from other people who do booktube type videos. I really like to listen to other people just reflect on what their experience has been with a chunk of time reading, and, you know, mid-year freak out tags, and everybody who around this time right now has been releasing really cool books about like what their top reads were of 2022, or like, you know, their overall, like how many books they read in 2022. I think that's really interesting. I haven't been doing this for long enough to have any type of superlative to, you know, structure this video in terms of best reads or worst reads or whatever. This is the first time I'm making a video like this. And so I think that this was a good place to start, and that it will be good to be able to reflect back on in the future, as I think I'll be reading more and making more videos like this. I wonder, how many books did I read? That just looks like... Anyway, leave me some comments below. How is your reading going right now? Do you consider yourself to be like a fan of, or like a viewer of, the booktube community? Do you make videos like this as well that you want to shout out below so that I can like come follow your channel and tell you that you're awesome? Are you somebody who hasn't been much of a reader in the past, and, you know, how do you feel about that? Is it something that you feel fine about, or that so that you maybe have a more of a goal around for like more reading in 2023? How do you feel about the concept of people like tracking their reading experiences? Do you think that seems really extra? Do you think that seems like a helpful thing? Do you think that specific like numeric thinking about something like consumption of art is a good, bad, or neutral thing? I don't know. It's just I find it interesting that this is a space where people can get sort of caught up in like turning into work of a hobby and something that is meant to be like a, you know, a personally enriching experience or edifying or educational experience. Like, I don't know. I'm glad to have just been able to like track this information here for myself today, but I don't feel any kind of way about the fact that I read 20 books this past year. I don't think that's a good, bad, or neutral thing. I think it's just how many books I read. If you do struggle at all with any type of like, you know, comparison syndrome, compare and despair, either comparing yourself to other readers in your life or people who make videos like this on booktube or bookstagram or booktalk, or if you are just comparing yourself to like your past reading habits of previous years and feeling like you didn't do enough for the same kind of reading or other type of like, you know, personal enrichment this year as opposed to previous years. I hope that you can go easy on yourself. We're all just doing our best. If you want to give yourself like, you know, a little self-affirmation sort of shout out in the comments below, you know, give yourself some props, give yourself some, you know what? I read 2 books this past year and it was the best that I could do and I enjoyed them and good for me. You know, if that would be helpful for you, you are welcome to use the comment section below for that kind of purpose. If you feel up to it, I hope that you'll check the description box below for information about some organizations that could use your support or use some shares right now. Or if you are having a hard time yourself, there are also some mental health resources linked below. And I hope that you'll check that out if you need to and just take care of yourself. If you enjoy mediocre pictures on Instagram or the cool misadventures of a cool 36-year-old cool kid on TikTok, or gay memes and rambles on Tumblr, then I hope you will come hang out at your social media location of choice. I am at ChloeThePayne on all the things. Shout out to my patrons, Hiker Steve and Cherry That Tomato. You can check out the description box below for more information about my Patreon, my website, hiring me for commission songwriting, all that good stuff. I hope that you'll consider liking this video if you liked it and hitting the subscribe button if you would like to stick around. I upload new videos on this channel every Wednesday/Thursday. And now, I think I need to go take a steamy shower and pass out. Let's do that. That sounds like a great plan. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you. And until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Oh my God. It's so like empty and dry and itchy and ow in my head. End card. Link, click on the links, links, click on the links. I think I might try to make tteokbokki. I went to my local Asian grocery and I got rice cakes, but I wonder if I'll just mess it up and be very, very sad. So maybe I should just have a grilled cheese and be the basic person that I am. Either way, yay for eating and sleeping. Hashtag eating and sleeping. All right, let's go to bed.